Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss about a very well-known mission, that is the lunar mission of China called as Chang'e. So it is the sixth phase of Chang'e mission that has been in news recently. So in this video, we are going to discuss in detail about what this lunar mission of China is all about, how it is different from the lunar missions of India as well as the other countries, and what is the significance of the mission that has been launched or was in news very recently. So let us try to first of all understand why Chang'e 6 mission is in news. Now just a few days back, a small spacecraft from the lunar surface took and collected the samples, and then it took off from what we term or call as the far side of the moon. Far side of moon generally refers to that side of the moon which is not visible to us from the earth. Now why it is not visible from us from the earth's surface, that is something we are going to discuss in the later part of the video. So anyway, a lunar sample has been collected, and we can say small craft took off from the moon's far side, then it headed into an orbit. Now around the lunar orbit, it would bring it and actually transfer the sample to another orbiter which is waiting for it. Once the material is collected by the orbiter, it will be brought back to the earth's surface and in a capsule that is termed as returner. Now this returner is something that will bring the samples back to the earth, and the entire journey is going to take place in somewhere a time interval of about 2 weeks. Now scientists will finally have access for the first time in the history to the pieces of moon soil and moon's rock, not from the near side but from the far side. Till now, whatever lunar missions different countries have sent, whatever samples these countries have collected, they have collected it from the near side of the moon. So China is going to bring the sample for the first time from the far side of the moon. Now all the spacecraft that are involved in the mission, whether it is the spacecraft that has taken the lunar sample, the orbiter waiting for it, or the returner which will bring the sample to the earth, is part of a larger mission of Chinese National Space Administration or agency, that is Chang'e 6 mission. So let us try to understand in detail about this mission, because as we have discussed, this is the sixth part of the Chang'e mission. So what were the earlier 5 parts? Now first of all, we have to understand that why China call its lunar mission as Chang'e, or in local Chinese word Chang'e. So Chang'e basically is believed to be the goddess of moon as per the Chinese mythology, and the picture you can see from here. So it is because of the goddess name of Chang'e, that is why the lunar missions are called as by the same name. Now for the first time, this mission began somewhere in the beginning of, we can say, 21st century, that is 2003. The Chinese Lunar Exploration Program was the term used for this entire mission by the Chinese National Space Agency, and the first mission under Chang'e happened 4 years later, somewhere in 2007. Now initially the first mission has a very simple task, and its task was to create a map of the moon surface so that the future missions can take help from this map. Further, Chang'e 2, it had actually taken help from the Chang'e 1 mission, where it has created a map of moon surface, and this phase first of moon mission, as China call it, equipped the orbiter with a better camera. Then came the third phase of the mission, where finally China was able to descend on the moon and successfully was able to achieve the descent in the year of 2013 on the December 14th. So this actually began the second phase of the Chinese Lunar Exploration Program as per China. In first phase, 3 feats have been achieved: the creation of a lunar map, successful descent of what you can say as a rover on the lunar mission, as well as installing an orbiter around the lunar orbit with a very high quality of camera. So this was the time when China began to develop its second phase of this mission. Now in the second phase, we have the Chang'e 4, which was a precursor to the current mission that we are talking about, Chang'e 6. Now it was the Chang'e 4 which somewhere began in 2019, and it carried the first lander and the rover to descend on the moon's far side. Keep in mind, till now, in December 2013, when China tried to descend on the lunar surface, it chose the near side. Once it descended successfully on the near side, then it turned its gaze toward the far side, and finally in the year 2019, it successfully was able to descend its lander and rover, which is in the more mysterious region, that is the far side of the moon. Achieving this first required another spacecraft around the moon that could talk between the ground stations on the earth and the moon's far side. Because the problem is that if you try to descend any kind of lander or rover on the moon side, you will not have any direct line of sight between the earth and moon, and that is a communication only from earth is not possible, and that is why a kind of solution is there to use another spacecraft which will act as a intermediary spacecraft to facilitate communication between the earth and far side of the moon. In the same year, the Chinese lunar exploration program of China said that China would now land an astronaut on the moon in the next decade. That means, as per this statement, by the year 2029, China will try to land an astronaut on the lunar surface. Now coming to the more recent mission, that is Chang'e 6. So Chang'e 6 is just a successor of Chang'e 5. Chang'e 5 was launched in late 2020, and it was this mission which deployed a lander on the near side of the moon. Now Chang'e 5 basically also was fitted up with three main modules. The first module is what we refer as ascender. The function or the purpose of the ascender was to collect and store the soil sample, specifically the youngest volcanic lunar soil sample as it can find, and then it can launch itself into the orbit. As it reaches the orbit, and another module called as orbiter would be waiting for it. This orbiter then will collect the lunar sample and will transfer them to another module that is referred as returner. And once the lunar samples have been transferred to returner, it was finally brought back to the earth for further analysis. Now keep in mind, Chang'e 5 was bringing all this sample from the near side of the moon. Now if we talk about the recent mission, that is Chang'e 6, it is trying to achieve the same purpose, same feat that Chang'e 5 achieved. The only difference is that Chang'e 6 is bringing the sample not from the near side, rather from the far side of the moon. This time the scientific goal is to understand why the far side of the moon is so different as compared to the near side of the moon. And to understand this, analysis of the sample from far side is essential, and that is where Chang'e 6 is going to play a significantly important role. Now we have discussed so many times about the near side and far side. So what are these? Now if whenever you are looking to the moon from the earth, the side that is visible to you, the face of moon that is visible to you is referred as the near side. And interestingly, only one face of moon is always visible from the earth's surface, no matter how much or wherever, which month of the year we are talking about, whichever this what you can say lunar phases we are talking about, it is only the one face of moon which is visible to us, and that is because of a phenomena that we refer as tidal locking. So moon actually is considered to be tidally locked to the earth. Now what does it mean? It means that the orbital period of the moon, that is the time it takes to complete one orbit around the earth, is same as its axial period. That means the time it takes to rotate or complete one rotation around its axis. That is why, as the orbital period and axial period is same, moon always is oriented to the earth in the same face or through the same face, and that is something which you can see from here. As you can see, if this is the face of moon, no matter wherever moon is around the earth's orbit, it is only and always this face which is visible. So this face which is invisible from the earth's surface, this we can call as the face B, is what we call as the far side of the moon. So because of the differences existing between near side and far side, scientists across the world, astronomers across the world are interested to analyze the sample of both the sides. So first of all, the first difference, the major difference that you will see is the far side of moon has a much more higher rocks or much more rockier terrain we can say, and the smooth plain are relatively fewer as compared to the near side. This is believed to be because of the heat that was released by the earth when Theia actually collided with the proto-earth, leading to formation of the moon, and also the thermochemical characteristics of the moon's near side surface thus became different than the far side. Second, it is much more difficult to land a spacecraft on the far side. Reason we already have discussed about, there is no such line of sight between the earth and the far side, and that is why as a solution, whenever any country tries to do this, uses the second spacecraft in the space. This second spacecraft in the space then relays the signal between the ground stations on the earth and the surface spacecraft on the far side, making the mission much more complex than the general normal landing of the moon that we have achieved several times. So, what is the significance of the far side? First of all, as we know that earth is continuously being bombarded by the solar flares, solar radiations, also called as solar winds. Now, because of the far side of the moon, earth screens this side from the solar wind. Now, in the initial stage of earth's formation and moon's formation, the atmosphere was having a high concentration of hydrogen and helium, but due to the solar winds, a large part of this hydrogen and helium simply burned away. Now, as we know, the far side of earth, far side of the moon was shielded by the earth from the solar wind. Thus, it is expected that the far side of moon must have a higher content of helium, and more specifically helium-3 isotope. Now, the presence of helium-3 isotope is significant because scientists believe that this isotope can be used in the advanced fusion reactors for generating energy, and not only energy but a huge tremendous amount of energy. So, this is something that interests most of the astronomers and scientists. However, one point we have to keep in mind here, that even if we are able to find the helium-3 isotope, currently we do not have technology to achieve this fusion. So, this is something that is very futuristic in nature. Next point what we can understand, that far side also has an importance in the fact that it is a much more better place to install space telescopes as compared to the near side. Reason is again simple, because the far side of the moon, as you can see from here, is giving you unobstructed view of the space. If you install, let us imagine a space telescope on the near side, this side is facing the earth, so the view of the space is obstructed due to the presence of the moon. And that is why if you want to have an unobstructed view of the universe, the far side is something that should be looking toward. In this context, ISRO also has underlined and highlighted it, and ISRO and the scientists at the RRI, that is the Urban Research Institutes, currently are working on developing such a telescope which can be installed on the far side of the moon, and that telescope has been named as Pratus. So, that is about the far side and the significance of far side. Now, what is going to happen in the future as far as all these space programs, lunar programs are concerned? So, now Chinese National Space Agency has announced that it is expecting to launch asteroid and also Mars sample return missions in 2025 and 2030. In other way, whatever Chang'e 6 is doing to the moon, something similar kind of mission will be sent to explore the asteroids surface as well as the surface of the Mars. Now, obviously, the success of these two future missions largely hinges upon the success of Chang'e 6. If it is able to successfully bring the sample from the moon, then only China can think of going beyond the moon to the asteroid belt as well as to the Mars. Apart from that, also if you talk about India currently however has no plans to explore the far side of the moon, and ISRO's Chandrayaan program, the Chandrayaan 3 that was launched recently, is expected to launch a lunar sample return mission in 2028. However, that is likely to be delayed. Now, more interestingly, if you take a look at the global collaboration, India is a member of what we call as Artemis Accord. Artemis Accord is largely a US-led accord which has an arrangement, and this arrangement is expected to have India and all other accord members to share know-how, knowledge, understanding and also to cooperate more extensively to explore the moon to a greater detail in the next decade. So, that is something that India can also look forward to derive benefit from. Also, since China is not a part of the accord, anything that China is trying to do or China will try to do, especially related to lunar exploration or space exploration, it is going to be a kind of single-handed task. That is something that we can expect to see in the future. that is all for this particular video. I hope you understood about the major objectives of Chang'e 6 and what is the significance of this mission as far as the moon and moon study and the lunar sample studies are concerned. Thank you very much.